Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jerome Yoskovitz, and today I want to talk about why veterans make great farmers. And one of the main reasons veterans make great farmers, or three of the main reasons, is due to discipline, vigilance, and pattern recognition, or threat detection. Now, to be disciplined is to live structured. This organizes your life and creates habits. It forms habits. One thing that you can do as a habit is purposely wake up every morning to monitor your irrigation system. Although you might have it timed, you want to make sure that timer is functioning correctly. And you also want to observe the plants. How are they reacting to that irrigation? If you see a plant wilting, you might want to check that soil moisture. You should always check the soil moisture anyway by putting your finger about an inch down towards the root zone, of a specific plant. When you put your finger into the root zone, you're going to feel for moisture because the roots need to drink. And if it's too dry in there, something has to be adjusted in your irrigation system. So it's good to wake up every morning and do that. Also, planting and harvesting timing. This is very important, especially if you're in business. So if you're going to plant carrots for a customer, if you have a CSA or you're delivering to a restaurant, you're going to want carrots, say they want carrots every week. You're going to want to plant a bunch of carrots one week. The next week, you're going to want to plant that same amount. The week after, as many as you need for that season, because you're going to want them to have the freshest, best product that represents you every time you bring it to that customer. And that's called succession planting. Now, if you were to plant a whole row of carrots and just take from it throughout the season, the problem with doing that is those carrots could get bitter. They could get too long and get too hard. You want the best, freshest product to present to your customer that represents you in the best manner. And that pays to be structured and disciplined so that you can monitor that and control that. Now, when we talk about vigilance or hypervigilance, veterans have this instilled in them just because of having to detect threats. Now, vigilance helps you adhere to that structure or that discipline that you've already established. So, say you wake up in the morning and you're checking your irrigation and you're checking your soil moisture, you also want to check your plants with your eyes and your ears open for pest damage or could be pest damage. You might detect, hey, aphids started coming onto this kale plant. What can I do to prevent them from coming next week? And even if you do nothing, next year when you check that journal, you say, okay, aphids should be coming. Because last year I annotated aphids showed up in March or April, whatever it is. And also check your plants and how you planted them. Is everything in formation? Are you missing a bunch of carrots? Did gophers take your carrots? You're going to have to respond to that problem. Whether that be planting raised beds for your carrots now or what you have to do, I don't know. That's on you to decide. But you want to be vigilant and pay attention to the way those plants are planted. And if they're always in formation every morning, you got to check that. This should be very familiar to veterans. Also, attention to detail, which doesn't even need to be said, but attention to detail. You don't want to go out and check for those pests and just do a once over. You want to be very vigilant. Say you have a row of tomatoes and you pass that row and you say, it looks fine. Say you have a hornworm sleeping on one of those tomatoes knowing you're walking by. He's going to eat that entire plant in 4 or 5 hours and you're going to have no tomato plant anymore. You need to be very vigilant and respond to those problems, those threats. So one of the major pattern recognition methods that veterans would easily incorporate in their lives is journaling your farm progress. So journaling is the pattern record. It is a before and an after action report. You're recording everything you're doing. You're going outside and you're observing, hey, what's the weather like? Is it raining? Where's the rain collecting? Is it dry? Where's the rain draining easy? If you have an area with good drainage, you want to plant an avocado there. You want to check your plant growth patterns. Did you direct sow those tomatoes in March and they didn't really flower until June? Would it be better if you annotated, hey, don't direct sow those? Have those ready so that in March you've got a plant that's, good size so that it'll take off and flower on time so you get tomatoes ahead of everybody else or, whatever your timing might be. But you got to have those tomatoes flowering and fruiting at a certain time, especially if you're in business. So it pays to be vigilant and record those patterns. Another thing is pest timing. Like I said before, you notice those aphids coming, or you notice the hornworms come at a certain time period. You want to write that down. You know, every morning you're going out there and all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's a hornworm on the tomato. This is the first one of the season. It's good to know that, because next year you're going to go, hey, it's July 1st. Last year on July 4th, I said there was a hornworm. It's time to start paying attention for them. It's time to always pay attention, but it's time specifically to pay attention for hornworms. Now, flowering and fruiting timing. I was once told in San Diego that if the mesquite tree flowers, that's when you put out your tomato plants. And I believe that has something to do with frost timing. I don't really know, but that's what I was told. I never adhered to it. I had my tomatoes already planted in trays, you know, before it was time to plant after the frost, which is early in San Diego County. Another thing is your inputs. If you're putting fertilizer or compost tea or compost itself, when are you putting that down? Because that's very important. You need to annotate, hey, I fertilized, you know, right when I transplanted these tomatoes. I fertilized right when I prepped this row. I put compost tea right before the tomatoes flowered. You got to keep track of that stuff, because it's important to know for the next season what to do and what not to do. You'll have that record and you'll know those patterns. It's like if, depending on your market, if you're growing tomatoes, if you want to say you're a dry farm tomato farmer, if a tomato flowers after that point, stop watering that tomato, and that's a dry farm tomato. You're going to get really little tomatoes, but they're going to be extremely flavorful. Some of the best tomatoes in the world. But now you got to pay attention to what's in that zone. What did you plant with those tomatoes? Because if you planted lettuce with those tomatoes, you are not getting dry farm tomatoes. You need to, from the beginning, pay very good attention and annotate the mistakes you made, because next year, if you want those dry farm tomatoes, you're not going to plant lettuce again. It's very simple. But keep pattern recognition in the pattern record, which is the journal. Now, another thing is processes and fundamentals of planting, maintaining, and harvesting plants, especially in business. You know, record how you planted. Did you direct sow? Did you transplant? Record how did you maintain those plants? What did you add? You know, how did you take care of the pests? What were the threats? What were the pests that interfered with the plants growing to their most vital state, which is what you want, is the most vital plant product to bring to market. And then harvesting. How did you harvest? How did you clean it? And how did you store it? Say you're selling squash to a market and someone cuts into one of those squashes and they said, hey, this squash is full of mold. They're going to come down in that store, and that store is going to have to take responsibility, or that restaurant or whoever it might be, and it's going to come back to you, and they're not going to want your squash anymore. So it would behoove you to pay attention to how you planted those squash, how you harvested those squash, and how you stored those squash. So you'll know next year, hey, I did this, but this didn't work. That's all it is simple pattern recognition. And with veterans and hypervigilance can be looked at as paranoia, and it can be paranoia if you're reacting to threats. The key is to observe and respond to these threats. I struggle with this as well. If you see a pest threat coming, don't react and just spray your crops, because it might not be necessary. There's a threshold. Say those pests came and they only ate 2 leaves of a kale plant. It would be pointless to spray anything, because the threshold is so minimal. They've only damaged 2 leaves of a kale plant. You have a whole row of them. So don't react. You observe and respond. It's like meditation. You know, you feel a sensation, you observe it. It's temporary. It'll pass. You have to look at it like that. You have to observe the threat. That's all you're doing. Don't label it. Don't do anything. Just observe it, annotate it, and fix it. Respond to it, walk away, whatever you have to do. But either way, you have a record of it. And that's the key to this. And I think that's what makes veterans great farmers. If you disagree with this, please put it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you agree with it, that's cool too. Please like and please subscribe to my channel. I appreciate your time.